recording is starting now, and we'll have this recording for afterwards.
Sounds good.
All right, so essentially what you're looking at here is a form that allows you to submit documents, be that as a HR person in this case, but other forms can be designed for a more user level or other departments, etc. So in our scenario, this is at the time at which a person has been vetted, interviewed, and is at the point where we're now entering them into our system as a new employee. So I'm going to go ahead and just fill in some of these blanks. This form is entirely custom, so you can customize every aspect of it, and from the theming to the layout to what content you're looking for. So in this case, we're going to add this person to, let's add them to council support, just so we have another folder to look at. And their start date we'll set as yesterday. And there's some documents that are required in order to create this employee in our system. So what this is going to do is allow us to enter documents into the repository via a web interface. So your HR person can have all this sort of at their fingertips via several other resources like email or attachments or on a USB stick or whatever, and they can browse out to those and upload them. So I've got some sample documents right now that I'm just going to attach to show you sort of how that looks. So in this case, I'm going to attach a couple of PDFs that I have in a sample folder.
And as Sean's doing this, just a reminder, for you specifically, Leeming, what we can do is we can change these. We'll give you this sample, and either we can change these or you can change them to meet what you need from an HR perspective. The reason we do it this way, one of the reasons we've started suggesting that this is a good way to input forms, and is partially because now the system will take care of putting all that metadata on it. It'll make sure that the employee name is on there, the department name. If part of the long-term plan is to integrate this into your HRIS system, it can also pull the employee number. If you think about it long-term, that also gives us some additional pieces, which we'll look at when we look at the workflow piece.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and submit that form. And again, this response screen is customizable as well. You can have a thank you page, or you can simply have it redirect to your main HR internal page or whatever you need it to go to. This thank you page does by default have options for downloading your content that you just submitted, printing it or emailing it. Obviously, going digital, we prefer not to print things, but these are all fully customizable as well. So what we've done is we've created a new user in our system called John Smith. He's in the council support department, and it has some associated documents to do with him. So I'm going to flip over now to the actual repository. So if we go to Human Resources, and I'm just going to refresh this page, go ahead here, we should see a new department called Council Support, which was generated from our form submission. We didn't have to do anything extra to make that happen. And inside of Council Support, we have a new user or new employee called John Smith. And if we open his folder, we can see that all of the documents that we attached have been added, and some applications have been done to them as well. So in some cases we have a template, well in all cases here, but we have two different templates that are applied to the documents. So several of the documents received the employee files template, which has some associated metadata. So I'll just click on one of those for right now, and you can see that in that template there's a number of items that are associated, and we didn't have to fill any of these items out. They simply populated by themselves. I'm not sure why it just cleared that, but I think it's because I hovered over it. But it fills in all these items for us without us having to do anything. Just let me click off that for a moment here. It also saved a copy of our form submission, which is entirely voluntary. You don't need to do that, but that's, if you click on to view, it will actually show you that as well. There's a preview pane here to show you what each document looks like. So this is a copy of our form submission. This is the contract itself. And these are all just sample documents that I had loaded, so they don't have any specific items here that are particular to anyone in particular. So if we look at this template, you'll see that it differs from the employee files template in that it has different items. So as Chris was saying, the employee ID could be fed from another system or pulled from the document, depending on what your preferences are. And again, all of these items show as optional as well. So did you want to continue to moving that, Chris? Or
well, I just want to go through very quickly. So one of the reasons that forms bring some advantages to having to the upload of the documents is what you're seeing here. So if you look on the left, and as Sean just mentioned, we've applied two separate templates to these documents. One is, and this comes from some conversations that I've had with other clients, really around the problems that their HR departments have with making sure all the documents get to the right people. In this case, what we've envisioned is a scenario where HR owns and controls all of the documents at the time of hire. So whether it's a benefits document, whether it is their direct deposit information, whether it's the contract or any other piece of that information, it's all owned and managed through the HR department, as it were. And for pieces of information such as benefits and banking information, there's other people potentially in finance who are going to need to know about that so they can confirm the documentation's correct, so they can put it into the financial system or the benefit system, or to kick off other pieces. So by having all these documents and having them grouped by template, having two separate templates, we can use that to kick off certain workflows. So for example, instead of HR now having to email the benefits officer or finance or payroll that there is a new employee that needs to be made aware of, it can be automated in the background that as soon as any file is created that has the benefits and payroll template, an email is automatically sent to your finance officer, so they know that there's a new employee, that there's documents for them to confirm, and there will be items for them to do. So we can start to automate some of those things that sometimes get forgotten or sometimes become difficult if you're not exactly sure who you're going to send it to. We can start to build out some of that process automation and take out some of the tedium from the kind of day-to-day things that keep you away from doing the important things. Now, from your perspective, is there anything you have we forgotten anything? Is there anything you'd like to see or know whether it's possible to do in this kind of forms-based process? Hello?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Yeah. No, I think we're good with that for now. I don't know that we've missed anything at this point.
Okay. So what we'll do now is go through sort of the other side of the coin, which is workflow, and we'll go through a scenario with this employee specifically. Sean's going to walk you through the workflow of what we do when a employee retires. So if we fast forward 25 years, John's been a very successful employee, and he's now ready. His time with us is now done, and he's getting ready to retire. Obviously, there is workflow. There is items to be done with his documentation. Some of them will be under record. Some of them can be deleted. But we want to make sure that he gets into our retired documents folder so that the next steps can be done properly.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Just before you get into that, though, just. Is it we're talking about something that was already typed in, like, so the form was already created or filled in by either one of our respective employees or the HR individual themselves, correct? So this was all input digitally and then left into a folder per se, so that the system could recognize it and it would create the back end in the repository. Is that it so far?
That's what we've shown you so far. Certainly certainly what can be done is we can build a form. We can show you that. Well, actually, Sean, can you flip over to the form builder real quick?
Yeah, I can do that. Sure.
That is one of the reason we started off with that is because typically what we find is that at the beginning people are looking, to take advantage of the fact that they as of today receive resumes and whatnot by email. We can certainly have a forms-based process that would allow you to not receive documents by paper or email and receive the information as a form. Is that more what you're talking about?
I'm just thinking, right, because somebody comes in and then we're filling out all the benefits info.
Yeah.
Okay. That stuff is usually all handwritten. So do I have to have somebody over here retyping that information in digitally here so that it can be captured? Because because I'm just trying to think how much. Where's my time saving here? Okay, right? So I get hired. I'm coming in because HR calls me. Hey, we got to fill in this paperwork. We got to get you processed. So great. So either they've given me the form and I'm handwriting it back, or I'm coming in, meeting them, and they're typing out the information as I give it to them.
Well, I think there's two answers to your question. The first is without a digital system in place, right? Your typical mode of operation is to have the employee that you've just hired or in the process of hiring fill out a physical piece of paper with all of their benefits details, and then they hand that to whichever HR person, and then that person has to do something with it, that processing aspect of it. So one answer is, instead of having them fill out a physical piece of paper, you sit them down at a terminal in your interview room or whatever, and you say, hey, could you fill out this online form, which again can be custom made to include all the same information that would be on a physical piece of paper, and then the user in this case would be the new hire. So they're doing all the work, which is probably going to be easier for them because instead of writing it down on a piece of paper, they're entering it into a computer system. It's the same information, the same amount of time spent, but it's not your time, it's their time. So that's sort of answer number one. Answer number two is they can still fill out a physical piece of paper, and there are other systems within Laserfiche that can take a scanned item and actually OCR that content, and it can learn, this specific region of a form, because most HR forms are fairly, formulaic or templated, where, the employee ID is at the top left, their name's at the top right, that sort of thing. We can build a system that will train, the OCR reader, if you will, to scan a document that they've written all the information on, pull those details off, and input that for you as well. So in either scenario, it's not an actual person typing in the information from your workspace.
Yeah, and I've seen the OCR stuff. It works okay. It's not great, and yeah, I don't know that I want to go that route, because then I need somebody to vet that information afterwards. What if it, yeah,
sure.
I do not like that.
You don't have to go that route. I know for some organizations, their outside benefits holder, they cannot replicate that form. It has to come from the employee in a certain form. If you, Sean, if you can just put up there create a new form. So,
I'll go to the form editor. If, like, you just want to see this sort of thing, or
yeah, so we can use this to build any form that you need. So if it's benefits, so if you have what it looks like in a PDF now, we can build that so that that's one of the forms that a new hire has to build. That can then be published, and as part of your new hire process, what gets to the potential new hire or the new hire once you've confirmed that you're going to hire them is a web link to the form that they have to fill out. That's their day one task. As soon as they're within your corporate environment, they have to go. They don't have to be a Laserfiche user, and they can still submit a form. So you could have day one, once they're in the corporate environment, you could have them filling out that form. Where it gets tricky is if we want to have this done beforehand. Some of the forms, then we'd have to have part of your form server available outside of your corporate environment. That's where some of that technical piece gets tricky. But from a form build, and can we use forms to replace the PDFs and the other kind of information and gather that all directly from the new hire or from an additional employee at a time when the benefits changes? Absolutely, we can.
Okay, so just a second. So in lieu of a signature, we would have to have some kind of a statement here. I certify, blah, 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 blah. Click this.
So there is a way to do signatures on these forms.
So I'll just demo that real quick. So all I've done is drag the signature block on here. We've done no editing of the customization or anything like that, but there is some modifications. So if we preview that, there's now a signature block, and you can click sign, and it adds my default signature, but there's definitively options for the user to type one in, and you can there's a number of styles if this is acceptable as a signature. The other thing they can have is if you have a tablet or otherwise, or even on a normal PC, just using your mouse, you can sign things as well.
And then you have the checkbox that this confirms that this is your real and true signature.
Oh, yeah, okay. We'd have to see if that's acceptable over here, but okay, yeah, at least we can. There's that option there. So, okay, and then. Intervention by our staff, because how are they going to upload certain other information? It's going to have to be a two-step process here for sure, because they're not going to have the resume if we sit them on a computer. Sorry, again, we're just talking internally here.
Well, is it possible to do it from home? Like, you said there's a link, so if they're able to do it, then they have to come in, and we can just go back and check it to make sure they have everything.
Would they normally come in anyway on site and you meet them, right?
Mm-hmm.
At some point.
Usually the first day of the
The only reason they come in is to do the paperwork, so we didn't need them to come in for that.
Yeah, if you were doing it on their first day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you either having them come before or on their first day, hey, you're here for the morning or whatever. Oh, okay, that's fine. Let's jump to the workflow process like you guys were gonna do there before we got sidetracked here.
Yeah, no problem. Just while we're on these screens, this I heard you mention sort of a two-parter. This is the most simplistic model that you can make. You can go
very
far
much so,
more
yeah.
complex. So this is literally taking a form and saving its contents to the repository. You could have this be a multi-phase process where the user fills in, certain aspects, and then it becomes another person's task where HR, vets that all the documents are there. If they're not, it can trigger emails. There's a lot of functionality that can be added to this process flow.
Yeah. No, I got that. I was just
okay.
What I was more thinking about is how it's going to save time or alleviate the workload from the HR staff has been vetting this information coming in. So yeah, no, I knew this was about as basic as you can get with in terms of your demo here. So yeah, no, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so I wanted to make sure you're aware that it can go from simple to complex as well. So now that we're within the repository, so this is now, as Chris said, 25 years in the future. John has decided to retire, so we're going to go ahead and click one of his documents that's part of the benefits and payroll template, which I happen to know as an HR person contains the current employment status field. Now this field, I don't currently have it defaulted to active, but obviously on form submission you would make it active or whatever your internal processes are. So we're going to change him from what theoretically would have already been set to active to the retired option, and we're going to save that option. Those changes are now saved. You can see there's an indicator at the top. In case we're still editing in real time or doing anything else, it leaves us on this page. But in reality, we're no longer sort of in this folder. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to the Human Resources area. We're going to notice a new folder has just been created called Retired. And if we go in there, we'll notice that John Smith has been moved to this location, and all of his associated documents have also moved there. Even ones that were not templated with benefit and payroll. It searched for everything that was initially in his new hire folder and has moved them all as a block. And again, that can be, you can move particular files, you can move all files, you can move files that are outside of his initial folder and are linked. You can do all sorts of variations. And again, just to verify, if we go back to Human Resources under Council Support, you'll see John Smith is no longer found in here.
Okay.
And that moving, as I say, is all handled by a workflow that we've built out that literally just watches for changes to that field and then does an action based on what it selected.
And that's the real sort of difference between the forms process builder and workflow. Workflow is designed to watch the repository and make changes to either a document or make people aware of changes to documents without somebody having to send an email. So it's really meant to make people aware of what's going on with existing documents. That's sort of the difference. Forms is really designed to capture information without having to have that document upload or to have to scan a document and then hope that the OCR recognizes either handwriting or the typing. Whereas the workflow is really designed to make sure that people that, as part of their daily work, have to know what documents are being handled or when documents are created or when something is available for them to do their job. So one that often comes up is when we're talking about changes to policies. That's something that no one ever likes to do, and it's something that happens maybe once a year or twice a year. The system can be set to automatically remind everybody involved in the policy revisions or policy confirmation process that it's time to do that. You store the document in Laserfiche. It becomes available to edit only at times where you designate that you're going to change, whether that's quarterly, yearly, bi-yearly, every 5 years. That way a person doesn't have to own the kind of remembering of that task. It takes the onus for remembering.
And to give you a bit of a behind the scenes of what that workflow that actually made that transition occur, I'm just going to swing a new item onto the page here. Should blow out soon. Go. And again, this is a fairly rudimentary one, and it literally searches the repository in a specific place because we only care about files that are under the HR branch. in this specific scenario. So it's searching a specific location. And then for each item found, it checks the status and it does, its determined item. So if it's active, it does nothing because it's just going to stay there. If it's retired, it moves it to the retired folder. And each of these, again, on the right has tweakable items. You can change them to where they move to, what types of things are added, whether more files are made or just an individual file is moved. If field assignments need to be made, so if you need more metadata to be altered, retired date gets stamped on something, or anything of those natures can all be added from the toolbar on the right here.
And one thing that we're seeing people start to use that, particularly in the HR use case, is retired employees. And I was actually just doing a consulting engagement with a group, and their biggest problem from an HR perspective with their documents is some have to be saved on site as they own the document and record retention, have to be saved by them for 5 years. Other documents, which you would think would be highly related, they have no actual retention record to keep. They're not mandated to keep. So remembering which documents you can delete and which ones you can't often becomes an issue. What we can do is we can build the rules so conditional on that field being changed, the retention policies are automatically applied. For a lot of organizations, particularly as you're moving forward as you move to digital, keeping control of how many documents you have, what you're keeping, so you can keep on top of it, and have the system keep on top of it instead of a person, is one of the more important aspects of things like workflow and getting the document capture correct, so that as you're searching for, if you're searching for somebody who is going on leave, or you're trying to get their disciplinary history, without the proper metadata, it becomes difficult to find, and you're hoping that somebody remembers when that happened.
What we do is we do everything manually, and then we scan it into Laserfish into the employee file. So when we're creating the employee, it's automatically creating an employee file for them, correct?
Yes, it's creating. If you move to the forms process, you won't have to do that scanning part. Obviously, until you get all the way over and have those forms and are comfortable that they meet your needs, there will be a mix of scanned documents and non-scanned documents. But each of those will get into the repository, and we can, similar to what you saw Sean do for the workflow to move it between folders, we can use that to make sure that all the documents that you currently have for employees all get the right information, so everything is aligning as you move forward.
So even that first digital part where we ask them to do a signature, that will create some kind of a file?
It'll be part of it will be similar to what you'd have now. It would be part of the file. So it would be a picture on the file.
Yeah, so I'm thinking the signature, for example,
yeah.
Right? So never mind the other stuff, right? Because I could see that, right? Because it's all adding into that data. So I am going to have embedded in John Smith's folder a picture of his signature, right? Not like in context or out of context. Like that form right there where employee name, department, start date, does that capture, does it capture everything separately, or does it capture that as, for lack of a better term, one PDF right there?
So you give me just 2 seconds and I can answer that for you. I think it's probably best just again to show you.
So if their documents are uploaded, they'll be separate. If it's an item on there, it'll be part of the form that gets saved to the repository.
So the form I just submitted, I did not attach any documents, so there won't be any attached documents in that folder. But there should be a new folder called Test User in the IT department. This was a signature that I attached to it. In the repository, there is no attached files, but there is that form submission, which if we take a look at that, stores essentially an image of the submitted form with the signature on it.
So if it's there, that would be fine. And
Yeah,
then
and I've written a white paper on what's acceptable digital signature. I can send that to you guys afterwards. And once you get to a certain point, if you have within your HRS system, you have a new hire process for adding those names so you get an employee number. If that's done first, that can be automatically added to the form. It really depends on what your process is. I think the key here is what you can do with forms is you can capture the information digitally from one place and at one time. We can integrate it with other systems to capture information automatically. We can also make this the first point of contact so that when you're adding an employee or when employees are adding their information to the system, it's all coming through here. It's actually what we're doing here is we're rebuilding all our processes. So Laserfiche is the first area of input of documents. For us, we can't digitize the benefits form because it's coming from our benefits provider, and they're not willing to work with us on that. But for banking information, the other pieces, what we're doing is we're going to custom build our own forms to input that information. And that way, that information, each block of information becomes a usable piece for other processes moving forward. For example, when we do our mileage reimbursement, all that information on our mileage reimbursement forms is automatically gathered. All I have to put in is where I went, take a picture of the receipt, so that gets attached, and all that information gets attached. From all that can be done with forms as the basis. It's really about designing that process and then figuring out what information you have to capture at each point.
Now, typically when you build these workflows or processes, when you go through this process, to engage you guys, what is it? Just essentially time and material? Like, would you spec out if I said, this is the actual process we want to do, this is the start, this is where I need? Do you spec it out and say, you know what, we can consult on 5 hours, 10 hours, whatever it is? Or is it's just however long it takes, that's what you guys build, if we want to.
Yeah, so what we've been doing with other clients is we can do it, and I guess my answer is yes and yes, and I know that's not the answer you want, so let me give you some more details of what I actually mean. Part of what we want to be able to do is keep your costs in control, and I'll be brutally honest, that is one of my the things that I find important. What we will always do is we'll help you in that initial phase of taking that process, which is now, I get it scanned in I get an email from the new hire, and then it goes here, and then it goes here. We'll help you develop that process. We'll help you translate that process from what it is now into a Laserfiche process. Typically, so I've been going through this with one of our school board clients. Where they're at the point where they're going to have a skeleton process similar to what you're seeing here, and that was 2 hours worth of our time. What we try and do is anywhere we can take advantage of what we've already built and reduce the custom time that we bill you for. That's what we're going to try and do. But yeah, if you want to engage us and make sure that you get sort of best practices, we will certainly we can send you what it would be PS hours, and typically we'll scope that out beforehand. It's hard to imagine it's more than 2 to 4 hours, but again, it depends how many forms we're talking about and how many processes we're talking about. We can also, one of the programs that we're developing is simply a review process where you would build it out and then you would send us the process and forms to review for you, and we're still trying to figure out what a good price for that is, but that's going to be very cost effective because it's just going to be an hour-ish of review time. So you do have a bunch of options. Typically what we're finding is clients, when they're doing their first one, they'll do a full-scale engagement with us where we give you a set of specs, and we'll use it as a training, and that way you get a sense of how much of this you can actually do yourself versus how much you need us for processes 2 through 100.
Okay, well, thank you for this.
In that case, I'll let you go.